Hello everyone, this is Reza. It's week 1, and in this week we are going to introduce the main software that we use throughout. What is Maya? How to set projects. We're going to talk about viewport navigation, how to use selection tools, transform objects, how to use or create primitives, how to bring outliner in use, and how to apply basic materials. So let's talk about this application right here. It's Autodesk Maya, industry standard 3D software. It's a powerful modeling, rendering, simulation, texturing, and animation tools. It is used to create a range of 3D contents for film, for games, for TV, and of course visual effects. It is versatile and easy to customize than most other 3D software packages. So to bring the layout, this is the default layout that I have right now. This is the main viewport. We have channel box right here. We have shelves and menu set. And this is my menu set, right? And then we have top menu bar, traditional top menu bar. Based on what I choose for my menu set, half of my top menu bar changes. We have animation timeline down the bottom and Maya command line right here. We're not going to use that anytime soon, but just so you know, we have that available here. Now, first thing you need to do before you start any project, you need to set a project, and that gives Maya an indication that where your project is going to be saved. Maya allows you to organize your file into projects, and projects are absolutely essential for managing files within Maya. If I go to File, I'm just going to click on that dot line to tear off the menu. Projects allow you to keep all your resources in one place, and Maya will automatically link resources into projects. If you haven't done that, you can just simply go set project. You can create a brand new folder, my first project. It can be on your hard drive, your desktop, your portable hard drive. You go set and you say create default workspace. Now that is going to create an environment file so Maya knows where to look every time you open Maya. Next is to create the right hierarchy or folder structure in that folder that you just create. You go to project window, and it's already set to my first project, and you go accept. Now Maya is going to create all the correct folder structure for you. So as you can see, I have my folder structure right here. Now from now on, make it a ground rule for yourself. All the MA or MB files, basically Maya files, go into this scenes folder. So every time you save it in here, because every time you set project, that's where Maya will basically look into to retrieve your Maya file. And every texture later on goes into source images folder. Okay? I'm just going to minimize that for now, but remember, from now on, every time you save or you open a file, you set project first. Now, first things first, we have viewport. The viewport is the main area that you will be working in. By default, Maya will load this viewport in perspective view. And in the viewport, you can create, arrange, and manipulate objects. Also, if I click this button right here, the layout changes to 4 viewports. One is my perspective, one is top, one is front, one is side. Now, one quick tip, if you hover your mouse over a viewport and hit the spacebar, you can toggle between what we call orthographic and perspective layout, and basically maximize the viewport. Now you may have noticed, I'm going to hover my mouse and press space, you may have noticed that I navigate quite easily. So if I were to create a cube, you can see I can orbit around the scene. What I usually do, I hold down Alt and left mouse button to orbit around. So orbiting rotates the camera in the viewport. This allows you to view the object in the scene from any angle you want, bottom, top, left, or right. So you hold down the Alt key and left mouse button, drag across or up and down in the viewport. Next way to navigate, we call it pan, and panning moves the camera side to side or up and down. To pan in the viewport, hold down the Alt key as usual and middle mouse button this time and drag across or up and down in the viewport. Now we have the third one, how to zoom. Zooming moves the camera in and out. So I can just hold down Alt and right mouse button and then drag across. You can alternatively use the scroller to move the camera in and out. So orbit, Alt left mouse button, and then we have pan, Alt middle mouse button, and then we have zoom, Alt right click or right mouse button. Very simple. We also have F with the object selected. To select an object, just click on it. It turns green. You can frame it by pressing or clicking on the F, and that will frame an object or objects that you have selected. Now, if I were to have another object right here and I select both of them and press F, it's going to frame both. I can press A, it does the same thing. This will frame all objects, A for all objects within the scene. So you may have 200 cubes. You don't need to select them all. You can just press A without having any selection active, and that is going to frame all the objects in the scene. You can see that I have 3 colored axes. Red is X, green is Y, and blue is Z or depth. So if I orient or orbit around the cube, X is side to side, Y is up and down, and Z is towards the camera, further from the camera. It's basically my depth. Okay, and we have the same orientation here. This is the orientation for my object. This is 3D axis is for my scene, for my environment. And it's important to understand how they work. Now, you may have noticed that I can actually move the object, but I didn't explain how. So hypothetically, if you have an object, I will talk about how to create an object, but let's say we have an object right here and you know how to model, right? If we have a model right here, I have 3 buttons here: move, rotate, scale. And if I toggle you can see the icon or my gizmos will change. We call them axis handles actually. So if I go to select my object and go to this button and click, then my handles appear. The active one turns yellow. So we know by now that Y is green, but the active one always turns yellow. So I can click on my center handle, and now I can freely move this object into all dimensions or all axes because the center handle is active. And I Control Z to undo. Now I can move in any axis that I want. If I click in between those, I can only move X and Y in here. If I select this one, I can only move between Y and Z, and if I bring my mouse, hover my mouse here, I can only move between X and Z. I can't go up and down. And this is when you want to only move your object in two axis handles, right? And the same thing applies for rotation. If I go to rotation, I can rotate it along X, I can rotate it along Y, and I can rotate it along Z. Okay, and I can rotate it along camera angle, which is a combination of X, Y, Z. Now every time I rotate or move, you can see my channel box changes. It shows that I have rotated in X-axis, but the value is quite accurate, minus 24.195. So that shows I can put in any number, for example, minus 90, and actually rotate it in minus 90 or minus 45. So you can be quite accurate with those numbers, or you can do freeform and eyeball it basically. Same thing applies for scale. 2D scale in Y, 2D scale in X, and 2D scale in Z. I can go and zero out those values to bring the object up. The right value is 1 to bring the object back to normal, or I can use center handle to keep the proportion and resize the object in all axes. All right, let's go to the next part. Now let's talk about how to create primitives, because I just made a cube and it would be interesting to know how to make one. Well, you've got many ways, different ways to create primitives. One way, which is the easiest way, is to use shelves. So you can click on the cube and create a cube and just rescale it, change the resolution, so on and so forth. I can create a sphere, move it aside, or I can create basically another object, cone or polyplane or torus. Right? Now you may have noticed that I can just create a good number of primitives in absolutely no time, and this requires management, how to manage those files. Before I get into file management, here's another way of creating primitives. Create, polygon primitives, and you have access to more options and more primitives. I can create helix, or I can create gear, and you can actually change their specifications and attributes by going to the input of your channel box. So, simple example, if I go and create a cube and bring it over, I can go to polycube right here, and I can change width to something like 1.5. I can use subdivision and increase my subdivision to add loops and add resolution. Now, another way of creating it is by clicking on the attribute hold down, I'm just gonna go here, hold down Control middle mouse button, drag to left and right. And you can see if you look at this number here, I can interactively change the resolution. You can do the same thing, for example, for helix. You can just increase the height, increase the number of coil, make it a bit bigger in width, and change subdivision. Simple as that. Now, you can do the same thing through your channel box, Control A for channel box, and you can add as many settings as you want. For example, for gear, you can just change the number of slides, radius. I'm using again middle mouse button, right? Feel free to use that, which is, I found it very useful, very interactive. So you can create all those type of shapes and forms in absolutely no time at all. But they need to be organized. How do we access a list so we can rename them, we can put them in a container, group them, so on and so forth? This is probably one of my favorite tools. I'm going to go on the left hand side, click on this button, and there we have the outliner. An outliner is extremely useful because you can see every single model that you've created in your 3D scene. Not to mention, you can double click on them and change the name. I can probably change this one to sphere and just remove the P in front of it. Change this one to coin. Change this one to plane. Change this one to just torus. I don't need number 1 in front of it. Change this one to coil. And this one to gear. And this one to cube. Now you can at any point of time hold down Control and multi-select or deselect by holding down Control. You can select the first one, go to the last one, hold down Shift and click, and it's very similar to how you manage files or do selection in Windows. Now the interesting part is, if you have selected everything or partially the ones that you won't like to select, you can hold down or press Control G to group them. Now they're part of one group and you can actually collapse the group and see what's inside the group. I'm just going to type in primitives underscore grp for my group. I have a habit of renaming everything, absolutely everything. It is really essential to practice that early on and make it a habit. Now, we talked about how to move an object. Let's talk about a component for an object and how to actually transform that. So objects are made up of components. There are 3 components that we need to know about. The first one is face, the second one is edge, and the third one is vertices. Let's go through them one by one. Let's talk about vertex. A vertex is a point at the intersection of 2 or more edges. All right, you may say, can you show me, please? I'm just going to get rid of the grid by clicking on that icon here. Now I'm going to right click on the model that I've selected, and with my right click held down, I'm just going to drag to vertex. Now you can see immediately that the lines are changing from green to light blue. Now I can click on each point. I can't click on the line, but I can click on each point. Now these are vertices. A vertex is a point, and they're manipulated to make detailed changes to an object. For example, I can select one, and I can go to Move tool, and I can just move it down or up. I can actually shape the model by moving the object, or changing the shape of the object by moving the vertices rather. Now, next one is an edge. An edge, the edges are used to make detailed changes to the border of the connected faces. So if you think about those two vertices, what connects them together would be, I'm going to hold down right click and edge. You can actually do the same thing with an edge. You can move it, pull it, push it, even rotate it, and scale it if you want to. The next component would be a face. Hold down right click, and this time I'm going to pick face. You can actually select a face and manipulate it, move it, or rotate it. Simple as that. Now, you need to know that faces are often referred as polygons or polys. So every time I say polygon, I'm referring to those faces or a selection of faces. Now, faces are manipulated to make broad changes to objects. So every time you really want to sculpt or modify an object, you need to toggle to face mode and apply modeling tools to that. Faces can be triangles, quadrangles, or n-gons. What do I mean by that? I'm just gonna temporarily switch to a modeling tool and apply a change. So let's go and make a minor change to this object. Now, all of a sudden, I have a quadrangle, four-sided polygon, and then I have two triangles and a new type of polygon called n-gon. What does it mean? I have 5 or more than 4-sided edges. 1, 2, let's actually switch to edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why? Because I actually deleted an edge here and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it's more than 4-sided. We're not going to call it a polygon, we're going to call it an n-gon. N-gons are actually pretty bad. So you need to stay away from them, and if you find them, you need to convert them to either quadrangle polygon or triangles if you can, because they create artifacts and they kind of break your model in the future when you move forward to animation or texturing or even lighting. Okay. Now let's talk about how to deal with selection. Very quick. You can right click to face and just hold down shift and select one by one. Somewhat tedious. Actually, I'm going to undo the changes I made to the topology, because I would like to have a healthy topology here. Okay. And by the way, when I say topology, I mean polygonal flow. I don't want to have any n-gon in my model. Now, we have a few ways of selecting components, right? So one is marquee select. I personally find it somewhat inaccurate because you can just leave a polygon behind. So one way of doing this is to hold down shift and just single click adding to your selection. To subtract, hold down control and you're removing from your selection. You can also have your selection and hold down shift and control and add to your selection. Okay, now you can have bunch of faces selected and shift and greater than sign to grow selection. Shift and less than sign to shrink selection. Finally, you can have one face or one polygon selected, shift double click, and then all of a sudden you have the entire ring selected. Select one, shift select the next one, double click, and you've got the entire ring selected. That can be a huge time saver. You don't need to select them manually. You can just select, shift, double click, select the whole ring. So there, as you can see, there are many ways of selecting your component. I highly suggest that you spend some time and get the hang of this and get quicker at selecting components to understand how vertices work, to understand how selection works. You can actually do ring selection for edges as well, as you can see. And just toggle, modify components in a simple model and understand how the outliner works. Just spend 5-10 minutes, get the hang of it, and then continue with this video. All right, there are a few more tips that I would like to give you, and then we wrap up. I usually produce only half an hour video for each week, and then we do more practical work in the classroom. So if I have this cube, I can just scale it down. By the way, shortcut for W for move, E for rotation, R for scale. Try to memorize it. W for move, E for rotation, and R for scale. Now let's say this is a door and I have hinges right here. I want to rotate this door. Right now I cannot rotate it properly because the axis is set to the center of this model. Now to change the axis, I can hold down D and just move the axis. Now, if I move it here, let go of D, now I can rotate this door properly. Now, you may say, I don't like this, this is inaccurate. It would be nice if I could just snap it to the point. Well, we have that tool. If you hold down D to go to change the axis mode, and then V and middle mouse, then you can actually snap to a point. And I can just snap it to the point right here. I already have D and V held down. I let go of both of them and it can just rotate it in the right axis. So remember, D to change the axis, D, V to snap. I can actually snap at any point of time. I can create this little guy right here. I can move it up and rotate, and I can just hold down V and snap it to any point I want. So V alone does snapping, but when you combine D and V, V does the snapping. If you hold down D and V, you can actually snap to a point and change the pivot at the same time. Now, Control Z does undo, and Control D duplicates the model, and it does it with the right or the most recent pivot point. And of course, as usual, you can do Control Save, Control S to save, like any other software package on Windows. Alright guys, that's it for this session. Now we know a little bit of user interface, how to navigate, how to create polygons, and we understand how to create or select components, how to reposition them. We understand how to use outliner and how to operate with the channel box when we bring our polycube, and we can change height, width, and depth through channel box input channel, and the attributes are in there. We're going to pick up where we left off in the next session. Hope you have a great day.